Hello, all, and welcome to the Movie Bears podcast. I'm Brad Harris, and each week I'm joined by some of my favorite husky, hairy, huggable homos to review movies either current or classic. And this week, it's not an or show, it's an and show. We're going to be talking about a current film, the new installment from the Conjuring franchise. Of course, we're talking about The Nun. And hey, you can't review a movie about a nun without also reviewing another movie about a famous nun, I guess famous in the movie world. We're also going to be reviewing Sister Act, starring Whoopi Goldberg. So we'll be taking things back to the 90s a little bit, and we'll see which nun film we liked better. Episode titles, guys. Will, I think you threw out Bad Habits. I was thinking like nunny business, kind of like funny business. I don't know.
I saw Jim had one on Twitter, like holy hell, and I think that works pretty well too.
Oh yeah, yeah, it definitely could work. Well, we'll think on it. You guys maybe think on it too. You give us some suggestions. But before we get into talking about both of these movies, I need to introduce you to both of these gentlemen you just heard from. Jim Pugliafago is here with us, of course. Welcome, babe. How are you?
Thanks, babe. I'm here. Welcome, everybody, to the podcast.
Glad to have you. And Will Lindis is here with us as well. Will, hello.
Well, hello, Brad. Did everyone here remember to say their prayers? If not, we might be in for a little bit of trouble tonight.
I wasn't praying so much as singing along to the Sister Act soundtrack. Does that count? It's holy music.
You know what? I mean, that counts. That's, I mean, we're not on that movie yet, but like that's sort of what they're doing when they sing, right?
Under His Eye. Wait, wrong franchise.
Wait. Oh, wait. Oh my God. Like, are we gonna do a 3? Are we gonna like squeeze that in here too?
We totally should.
Well,
that would be
it's
awesome.
Close. Yeah.
It's not. Yeah. I think it's more of the. I mean, there's the religious aspect and also like the costuming. Like the costuming.
Yeah.
Sure. It's evocative.
They wear red nuns.
Does that mean are they runs then? Like,
well, I don't think we want to call them runs. Like
is it like Final Fantasy where you've got like black mages and red mages? I don't know.
Wait. So, are you telling me that the Handmaiden universe, which is what we're talking about, of course, that it's now part of the Final Fantasy extended universe?
It is. Didn't you see Offred summon Shiva to like take out a whole bunch of eyes?
Oh, I didn't. I'm not on that episode yet. Spoilers.
Oh, I spoiled you.
Oh,
sorry.
Shit. Oh my God, Brad. Spoiling television shows is a very bad habit.
Well, I won't tell you about when Cloud shows up with his sword. Don't worry, I'll protect you from further spoilers.
There's like one like nerd listening right now who's just like absolutely living for what we're saying, and then a few other people like I'm seeing the look on Jim's face. It's just kind of like I'll just let them go.
Yeah. Sorry, Jim. I know you are not a Final Fantasy.
I don't know. I know it's a video game, probably, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
I think I've heard of it before. Is it a movie too?
Yes. Yeah.
You guys feel free someday to do your own like Final Fantasy movie show if you want.
Oh goodness. Well, definitely going to be fun to talk about both of these movies. Before we jump in and do so, though, also want to give a shout out to some folks who are in the live chat with us. Austin Glenn says hello. Hey, Austin.
Hey, Austin.
Glad to have you with us this week. See a few more folks who are on the show. Definitely feel free to say hi in the chat. As we're talking about these movies, we'd love to share your thoughts too. So definitely drop them in the chat, and maybe we'll give you a shout out on air. But guys, we got a fuck ton to talk about. Oh, I swore. Oh no. Good thing you're not wearing a habit.
You're gonna get wrapped on the knuckles by a ruler. I think that's what the Catholic nun kind of punishment is, right? Don't they walk around with a ruler and like rap kids on the knuckles?
We could wrap him on the knuckles, make him say like 5 Hail Marys, and then probably write something on a chalkboard.
Yeah. And maybe get on my knees and pray to him.
Well, now hold on. Like, we want to make sure that we're not going down that avenue. Although it is, I guess it is low-hanging fruit.
Mm-hmm.
Oh boy. All right. We're punchy already and we're only 5 minutes in. All right. So let me just say this. We're going to talk about both films, The Nun and Sister Act. We're going to kick things off with a discussion of The Nun. If you're new to the show, you may not be familiar with our format. With current movies, we talk about them completely spoiler-free for 10 or 15 minutes to start. So if you're kind of on the fence about seeing a movie, you value your innocence about the plot, we will protect you. But we'll also give some advice just from our perspective. Did we like it? Do we think you should check it out in theaters, wait for rental, or skip it entirely? And then we'll give you a fair warning before we open spoilers up. When it comes to movies that are more than 20 years old, like Sister Act, we're probably going to spoil the crap out of it pretty unabashedly. I think everyone who's going to see that movie has probably seen it, but you never know. So yeah, spoilers will be fair game for that. We'll talk more about that later. But guys, think it is time to conjure up a discussion about The Nun. Are you ready?
Yes.
Yeah.
Let me do a blessing. Let me do a blessing first. Okay. I think we're good.
Wait a minute. Did Jim just do an upside down cross?
Father, Son, and Holy Ghost.
Oh, there you go. All right, then. Here we go. Our discussion of The Nun. All right. So, this newest installment from the Conjuring universe is here. And I know we all got a chance, of course, to see it ahead of the show. Jim, if you would kick things off for us, maybe talk a little bit, obviously, about the setup of the film, whether you think it's worth seeing and all that good stuff. But maybe even also talk about the movie-going experience in terms of a scary movie on a weekend night. How'd things go?
A little bit. Yeah, I'll touch on that. Well, yeah, so it's not officially fall yet, right? We don't get there till a couple more weeks, maybe, kind of end of September. But we're definitely kicking off the fall horror movie season. And we went to see The Nun this week. And a lot of other people did, too. We'll get into that and how the movie's been received, at least in the popular world. This movie is directed by a guy named Corin Hardy. I looked him up. Not a first-timer, but probably his first major kind of film. The story is by James Wan. He's kind of like, at this point, he's kind of like the architect of this Conjuring verse, right? I guess we can call it. We've got this being, I think, the 5th movie in this kind of, call it a franchise, or I call it the Conjuring verse so that I know what I'm talking about. This one stars basically it's basically a three-hander. It's got Taissa Farmiga in the lead role. It's got Demian Bashir and Jonas Bloquet, or Bloquet. I'm not even sure how to pronounce it. Not really household names, but if you look them up, they've got some credits there. So the movie, the story takes place in the early 1950s, before the events of the Annabelle and Conjuring movies. So a young nun is scared by some mysterious presence in the form of another nun, and apparently kills herself by jumping out the window of a spooky-looking Romanian abbey. And it's a mess for the church. You know, it's bad press, the whole thing. So the Vatican calls upon Father Burke. This is Demian Bashir. And he's kind of a think like The Exorcist. He's kind of one of those guys. He's like a hired gun called in by the church to kind of handle demonic presences and whatnot. And strangely enough, with him is a young, idealistic novitiate, I think it's called, Sister Irene. She's a nun to be, yet to take her vows, which for some weird reason this movie wants to remind us of like 6 or 7 times in the movie. Like every character who like meets Sister Irene says, "And you haven't taken your vows yet, have you?" Some of them say it more than once. Maybe it's for plot reasons. I don't know. We'll get into that. Anyway, they've gone to this abbey in Romania, 1950s, to investigate what's going on there that caused this other nun to basically kill herself. They meet up with a young, handsome local farmer, delivery guy called Frenchie. And Frenchie kind of leads them on a little tour to the castle. They want to find out what's creepy up there in that abbey. And so, but as any sage horror moviegoer might guess, strange things start happening almost immediately. And it becomes apparent that an evil force that has lived in the abbey has been released. Our three brave characters must find a way to defeat it before it's too late. So what did I think about this movie? I think the cast overall, I'm going to start out positive, guys. I think the cast overall in this movie, I think it's really good. Thaisa Farmiga is good. As Sister Vera Farmiga is very good. So is Thaisa as the young nun in this movie. Again, before her vows. She hasn't taken her vows yet. Don't forget that.
Wait, hold on. I'm sorry. Did she take her vows or not? I don't know.
No, she has not taken her vows yet.
So wait, I'm confused. So she hasn't taken her vows yet.
No, she has not taken her vows yet. So she's not a full nun, apparently. She's like a cub nun, I guess. I don't know. And they call it a novitiate.
I like that better than cub nun just because.
Cub nun?
Like, yeah, I get the imagery, but like novitiate's better.
But yeah, she's great in this. And it's a great idea to use her in these films because her apparently, I thought Thaisa Farmiga originally was Vera Farmiga's daughter, but she's really her younger sister. 21 years difference between them. And I'm watching the movie and I'm like, oh, this is a great idea to use her. She's amazing. She looks so much like her mother. And I'm thinking, at the end of the movie, I find out, oh, it's her sister. But yeah, same family. They look so much alike. She looks so much like Irene Warren, and her not only that, the way she looks like her, but she's got her mannerisms and speaking patterns down. So she's actually channeling Irene Warren from the other movies, and I think that kind of drew me in a little bit. Though in the end, it really was kind of a lost cause. And I hope they continue to use her in the series. The movie itself, I thought, was just well made. And technically, I think it's a well-made movie, but unfortunately, it's pretty boring, like a strictly by the numbers, like crucifix-hating, demon from hell, haunted mansion movie with nothing really exciting or even surprising or scary to offer. And when you've got a horror movie, a big horror movie that's coming out, and it doesn't really have that many scares other than a few jump scares, that's a big sin. So
a sin. Oh, see what you did there.
Yeah. So it's a forgettable story. And the jump scares didn't work on me. You could, again, another sin is you could see these things coming a mile away, the way they set them up. So it kind of robs them of their effectiveness for me. It's a very successful movie. It made like 130 million worldwide in just its first weekend of release. That's incredible for a $25 million movie. So a lot of people saw it. I saw a lot of people online say they really liked it. It's just definitely not for me. Too bland, unoriginal, which is why normally I try not to make a habit out of movies like this.
Oh boy, how many nun puns are we gonna have in this episode?
I was gonna say none, but
yeah, we saw it with kind of a full audience on was it Saturday night, babe?
Yep.
I think. Mm-hmm. Yeah, opening weekend Saturday night, and it was fun. I mean, the audience was kind of into it. There were some people screaming during some of the jump scares, some like nervous chatter during some of the really quiet, like suspenseful moments where you knew something was going to happen. So that's always fun to see in a theater, full of people who are kind of into the movie. But I noticed that about halfway through the movie, that kind of fell off a little bit. I just think the movie didn't really carry the audience very well.
So Jim, just to clarify then, is this like a pass? Is this a soft recommend?
Oh, no, this is a definite pass for me.
All right. We got a pass from Jim. Pass meaning like
pass
on seeing
not
it, right?
I'd pass on seeing it in the movie theater. Yeah.
It'll probably be on VOD by Halloween anyway.
It kind of bored me. Yeah.
All right. Well, how about you? What was your take?
Yeah, so I mean, first of all, obviously people are seeing this. I didn't look at the box office numbers, but just anecdotally, I saw it on a Tuesday afternoon at 5:00, and it was an absolute packed house. Like
Whoa.
there's not an empty spot there. In fact, I had to stop the dude sitting next to me, like right as the credits open, like he pulls out his cell phone. I'm like, here we wait, it gets worse. I'm like, here we go. He's gonna check his text messages, and then he turns it sideways and he hits record.
Oh,
and so he's just sitting there, and I look over at him. He looks over at me, and he just keeps recording. And I'm just like, okay, well, he's gonna stop any second now. No, he's not. So I was like, hey, you need to put your phone away. And fortunately, and granted, this is a Cinemark where usually when you say something like that, it turns into a fist fight. The guy was just like, oh, okay, and put his phone away, and that was it. Yeah. So it was fairly non-eventful, save for the fact that the dude had the fucking balls to try to film a movie in a packed theater, like you know. So, but
I just don't understand the idea.
I'm glad it ended up being non-eventful, because you getting a black eye would have been bad.
Yeah, no. I mean, I wanted the dude to go straight to hell, but no, he did the right thing. He converted. So as far as the movie itself, I'm very closely aligned with Jim on this one. The summation is I didn't like the movie, but there were some good parts. I think the cast is one of the strengths. Taissa Farmiga is someone like you. Of course, you mentioned the link to Vera. She's someone that we've seen in a few roles in the past, especially it's kind of in this genre, kind of horror or horror adjacent. She came up through American Horror Story and did quite a lot there. And then she was the lead in, we saw it at South by Southwest, The Final Girls. Remember that one?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yep.
Mm-hmm. And so I was already predisposed to this one. Damien Bichelle was one of the main characters from The Hateful Eight. And Jonas, I kept seeing that Jonas Bloquet. I'm like, yes, that's exactly it. Like I was like, I know I've seen this dude somewhere, but I don't think I've ever heard this guy's name before. And when I looked him up and saw he was in L, I was like, oh, okay, cool. The cast is good. They all put in solid work. I think in each case they understood what their characters were. They understood what their characters weren't. They understood that some of their characters' motivations were on paper a little thinly developed, and each of them still sort of pushed beyond that and gave me something that at least was passable performance-wise. So performances are good. And some of the set direction looked really, really good as well. There's, without saying what it is, there is one really just beautifully positioned and beautifully blocked like overhead shot in this movie, maybe about halfway through, that just was like, okay, there's definitely some talent here. They aren't just phoning it in. But the problem with this film, and it's a big problem, it's enough to where I can say at the end of the day that I don't recommend this movie. This script is an absolute mess. The story only exists to get the characters in a series of situations where they can be startled by the nun doing jump scares, which is what this movie has to offer in terms of scare. It's like, yes, there's some atmosphere. Yes, there's some other things, but it's jump scare after jump scare. And this is the character, like we know that this character is part of that Conjuring verse, right? And we've seen the character appear, the nun character appear very lightly in some of those movies. And she always seemed like she had such menace and such like presence and such like overwhelming evil. And here it felt like a fun house. Like it felt like someone in a costume jumping out and going oogity boogity whenever it was time to do a scare. And I don't want to say that necessarily the character deserves better. Spoiler alert, I'm not as big on this franchise as a lot of people are. But at the same time, within its own mythology, I think they've built up this character to be something kind of big. And this film very severely underdelivered on that. So it's a pass. It's a skip it for me. I I think if you're really invested in the Conjuring series, you know, maybe check it out. But just on its own, the film's flaws outweigh its positives just too much.
Wow. All right. So 2 passes, 2 red X's. I wonder if I'll be a red X or a green check. For
Give us a
me,
green check.
for me, I think I did come down on this movie a little more highly than you guys did. I wasn't expecting anything like crazy, amazing, or awesome. You know, we think about some of these spin-off movies like the Annabelle films. I feel like they're pretty much of the same ilk. I mean, it's jump scares and, you know, scary shit that isn't that scary. But the thing about it, I guess, that was a draw for me was just I was interested in this nun apparition thing. In the last Conjuring movie, you know, we had the nun painting. We got a little bit of backstory about the nun. So I was like, all right, I'm interested to see where this goes. I want to learn more about this this character, and I felt like we got some of that. It was really interesting to see the abbey and the convent and this creepy old like Romanian castle thing. I thought it definitely set the mood really well. Some pretty awesome set staging, I thought. I think the problem is that when your castle only has a handful of people in it, you know, it feels very devoid of life and alone, which is probably intentional to kind of, you know, feed into what the movie's trying to accomplish. But I don't know. It's almost like saying like the scenery is great, but like the company in the car on your road trip sucks. You know what I mean? Tessa Farmiga was great. She, oh my God, has Vera Farmiga's mannerisms. Jim, you mentioned it, down pat. Even the way like she says certain things, like it just. I thought it was a young Vera Farmiga, and so I love her ability to do that. I've seen her in American Horror Story and other things, and she doesn't normally channel Vera Farmiga like that, at least in the things I've seen her in. So I was like, man, she's doing great at this, and you know, I just kind of accepted at face value that it was a younger version of the character. But even though I came down more positively on this, I do still think it suffers from some pacing issues. I think it telegraphs the scares way too much ahead of time. This isn't a spoiler. Like the biggest jump scare for me was in the trailer, right? When you see her like walking down the hall and now there's a nun behind her and she turns around and she's like, "Sister?" And then a nun comes from the side. Like, that was the scariest part for me, and it had been spoiled in the trailer, unfortunately. We'll talk more about it in spoilers, I guess. There are a few interesting things that this movie does, but I'd say it's probably the weakest entry in the Conjuring franchise for me. But that said, guys, Halloween's coming up. If you want to go see a scary movie in theaters, you want to see it with a crowd that's apt to react to some of these jump scares. I mean, sometimes that's half the fun. I would say go see this in theaters. Don't expect anything amazing, probably. If you can go on, like, I don't know, Discount Tuesday or something. Will, apparently your theater has lots of folks there on a Tuesday. That might be an option. Otherwise, I'd say, maybe like wait to watch it next Halloween. I don't know if it will be out in time for this Halloween, but maybe save it for next year when it's on Netflix or something even. But I think it was more favorable than you guys.
Perhaps it's damning it with faint praise, but I would not say it was the worst of the Conjuring franchise, only because the first Annabelle movie I thought was just ridiculous bad, and I don't think this one was. This one had some competence to it. Like I would put this one above that one, but I mean, I guess fourth place out of the Conjuring franchise is maybe not the best place to be anyway. So again, damning with faint praise.
It's true. It's kind of like Survivor or Big Brother when you're in like an alliance of 6 and you're at the bottom. Like you're never going to win the money, but I guess you can show.
Yeah.
Anyway.
I guess for me, it was just its lack of imagination in anything, even in the scares, in the story, in the origin of the nun, which we'll get into in spoilers. Like it all seemed pretty pretty like standard stuff that we've seen elsewhere, and just didn't. I don't know. There wasn't really much story there. I mean, it was just, is this haunted? This is not haunted castle, but it's an abbey with a demonic nun in it. Like, that's the whole fucking story, basically. There wasn't that much there. And we'll talk maybe more in spoilers about some of the things. There were some things I liked. I learned about how crazy people were during the plague when they were burying their dead. I learned that was
careful.
I know. I'm just saying. That's all I'm going to say. I learned some things about that. Was pretty cool. A pretty cool, interesting the way that tied into the story. But beyond that, I struggle to think of anything that kind of stood out for me.
I've got a question about a thing, because I may have had a different take on something than I think the two of you did, and that's and it's very likely I missed something as I was telling dude to put his phone away. But so is the idea that Sister Irene is supposed to be a young version of Lorraine?
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely.
Because they have different names, like Irene and Lorraine.
Well, here's the thing with nuns, they always take like a different name than their given name when they join a convent or abbey or whatever that is. So I don't know if this was like her original name and then she changed it for her nun stuff. I don't know. I mean, she's not a nun in like the Conjuring movies. So like maybe she was Irene and then decided to go by her middle name. I mean, I have no idea.
Yeah, it seems like the movie was going that way. I don't know why they would have cast it the way they did and had her play the same mannerisms of the Lorraine character, almost exactly the same, if it wasn't, alluding to the fact that it was that character.
Could even happen is, imagine a movie, and again, this is getting into like fan fiction territory, but even if they aren't the same character, imagine another movie like The Nun 2 or whatever it is, where Irene meets a young Lorraine and kind of helps her hone her psychic ability, since that's a bond they have. I could see them going that route too. Like, it's neat. There's options, and that's cool.
Maybe, but like, I mean, even in all right, let's do this. We're going to move to spoilers because we can't dance around this anymore. So if you are sensitive to spoilers, if you want to avoid them, now's your time to step away. If you're watching the live broadcast, come on back for Sister Act in 15 minutes or so. If you're on digital tape delay, go ahead and skip forward according to the show notes. Blah, 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 blah. Okay, are we good? We're good. So here's the thing. The beginning of the movie shows us a clip from the last Conjuring movie where they're talking about like the nun and their like experience with the nun and blah, blah, blah. It basically sets this whole thing up, right? So if Sister Irene isn't Lorraine Warren, then I feel like this movie really didn't make a super firm connection. Not only that, but there's this whole thing at the end where, we're in spoilers, we find out that this Frenchie character we've had in The Nun is actually a character we saw in the first Conjuring movie, and like a video they're showing of this exorcism. Right. And Lorraine was involved with that, and she seemed to know that guy. So if Sister Irene isn't Lorraine, then all of a sudden this movie makes absolutely no fucking sense to me.
Unless Irene is Lorraine's sister. And they're related, but it's not the same person.
I think my problem with them being the same character comes from, and maybe this is poor writing, which is another issue with this movie, right? Is if they were going to go that route, I think that the strong, like she wouldn't have taken her vows there at the end. As it is, she's taken her vows, and so she's off on this other path that's very divergent from where we find Lorraine. I could almost have seen them instead going like hey, I don't need to take my vows. I need to step away from all of this. And then that sort of tracking the path over to her becoming Lorraine. I think this is interesting. Like, Like this is way more interesting than the movie itself. Like, like that we have a movie where
that mystery is way more interesting.
Yeah, where we basically have two separate reads on whether the character is another character or not.
Mm-hmm.
And that's fascinating to me. Like that's really neat that exists. Like put the rest of the movie aside. Like the fact that we have a little mystery to unravel, like that's cool.
Yeah, it is cool. As a matter of fact, there's an article. I just Googled it. Is Sister Irene Lorraine Warren? And there's a whole article on Bloody Disgusting, which is a a website devoted to horror film and analysis and stuff. And they say it's a real head scratcher that the movie puts a lot of effort into kind of setting Sister Irene up as Lorraine, but never really makes that connection at the end. Even though it comes so damn close to doing it, it doesn't really do it. So yeah, I think you're right. I think it is a mystery. And if I earlier said that it definitely was, and I stand corrected, but at least in my mind, I'm like, oh, that's definite. Even early on in the movie, I was like, oh, that's definitely Lorraine. There must be some way she quit the sisterhood and, gave it all up. And we just don't know that in the other movies.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, here's the thing. I know a former nun. Nuns don't necessarily stay nuns forever.
Right.
Yes, they can be excommunicated from the church. Yes, leaving their marriage to God is a really bad thing. But like, I know someone who was a nun. She was a nun. She lived in, a convent for a number of years. And then, she kind of decided it wasn't for her. She left. She did her own thing. With the Lorraine character, I mean, I feel like we could spend a lot of time unpacking this and not talk about the actual movie.
That would be a good movie.
But I almost wonder if they're setting up a chain of prequel movies with Taissa Farmiga, kind of explaining how she gets from like being a nun who took her vows to still being a spiritual person, but like, married to Ed and going through these adventures. Like, maybe one day we'll find out when they announce the next movie, on this spoke of the wheel. But it's kind of crazy.
And that's part of the weirdness too, is like if they're going to go that route, then they've sort of like messed up their own continuity. I'm reading the same thing you did, Jim, and like so one of the points they also point out is that in the movie's lore, the year that this movie takes place is the same year that Ed and Lorraine found the New England Society for Psychic Research together. So if it's going to go from one to the other, either they've got to sort of figure out like their continuity error there, or she like quit like right away.
Well, I mean, getting attacked by demon fucking nuns and almost killed several times might just do that to you. I don't know.
Plus, it was the church that sent her there. Let's not forget they set her up, right? They knew that she had this vision power or whatever, and they're just like, "Oh, hey, take her." And she almost died in the process. Like, if that's me, I'd probably be a little pissed off at the church.
And by the way, Lorraine has the exact same vision power, right?
Yeah. Right.
I hope you guys are right. I'm still on the other side of the fence on this one, but like you guys' like story is like way better than like what I think the movie came up with, and so I want to see them do that. I'm like even if they like if someone listening is like tied to the film, it's just like holy shit, that's a good idea, and takes that from us right now on the podcast, please
sue their asses.
No, do that, because like that is a way better path than what this movie has given us, which is just a lot of confusion with the characters. And I think we saw that through the Annabelle films as well. We saw that with The Conjuring, and I think we kind of saw it, granted it's not the same universe, but we saw it with Insidious as well. Like the world building is very, like the one thing that was sort of weird and creepy about the previous one becomes the main thing from the next one, and it sort of like evolves out like little layers of an onion or something like that. And I think they lose the thread of what could be the compelling part of that. I think I'm ready for just another Conjuring movie, just like another, like get us back to the psychics dealing with phenomenon in the, was it the 70s? Yeah.
I'm with you. I think it's a mix. I mean, I don't know if they'll follow that or not. But.
Yeah. I don't know. I guess I felt like the movie was just very obviously trying to tell us that it was a young Lorraine. I didn't even question that it wasn't Lorraine. So now I guess I'm rethinking, a little curious myself, but I don't know. We'll see. Guys, we got 10 minutes to wrap up this mofo before we switch movies. So what other spoilers do you want to talk about?
That overhead shot is, and I just want to call attention to it, but there's a spot where we've got the characters are separated. This is sort of in the middle of the film as the kind of the creep factor is building up, and we've got Irene's in the main chapel area, surrounded by all the other nuns who are doing their perpetual prayer, and things are getting like really intense at this point, and we know that like this demon's gonna come busting out at any minute unless they just like pray it away. And so there's this shot where it kind of tips up because you see Irene kind of kneel down in her like gorgeous white costuming. By the way, that's just like, it looked beautiful the way they had that, the color and the fit and all of that. And so she's doing her prayers, and the camera tilts up, and you see them right between the podium and the pews, and you see all of the nuns in black just sort of circling her in this prayer circle type thing. It was a wonderful shot. Like, when you see those like end of year IndieWire, David Ehrlich, montage videos of like the best movies of the year and like some cool shots of it. I don't think this one's going to make his montage list, but this shot would make it. It was really freaking good. And there were a few other shots like that as well. I love the camera work here. And especially
in the graveyard. There was one in the graveyard where I think it showed the shot right down into the grave, into the empty coffin, I think, at one point. That was pretty awesome. And that was what I was getting at earlier. Like, apparently when they buried people back in the plague, when they were burying people left and right, like, they had to bury them so fast because the plague was spreading, and, they had to keep the people who weren't infected from the diseased people. They were burying people so fast, I guess they buried some people that weren't actually quite dead yet. So if people found themselves buried and they woke up from a nap or something, and they were like in a coffin underground, they had like a little string, and you pull it and it rang a bell on the gravestone 6 feet above their head. How fucking creepy is that? That was pretty chilling, I thought, to think about. Waking up and you're buried alive because they thought you were dead.
Every so often I watch a movie, like a horror movie, and the premise of a scene makes me think, like, the exact phrase is always, "Oh, fuck, that's so hard." Like, it's one of those things that's like, not like an insult to the movie, but like the situation is one of those things that like would be personally terrifying to me. So fuck, that's so hard. Like, I would not want to be in that. And the idea of being like buried alive and having to ring a little bell for like hoping someone would like hear me and knowing that I was running out of air is definitely a fuck, that's so hard situation.
Yeah.
Like,
well, just make sure, if that does happen though, Will, that you light a fucking lighter in your tight confined space with very little air.
And I just hope that the person digging me out shoves their shovel as far into the head section of the coffin as possible.
When he makes that last.
Yeah, as she's doing that, and it's like it comes like centimeters from his face. Yeah. It's like she knows he's in there because that's why she's digging him up. And she knows that his head is either going to be right there or maybe on the other end, but probably there. So like, why shove your shovel all the way through it? That's a nitpick. I know she was in a panic state and all of that, but it was just one of those, like, can you imagine if like that next shot was her like pulling it up and it's just covered in blood and it's like, oh, there goes the father, there goes the priest.
Just wasted all that effort. Taking that shit.
Okay, so question for you guys. The other nuns, were they dead the whole time?
They were dead the whole time.
Okay. Yeah. That's what I thought. But someone was like fighting me on Facebook about it. And I'm like, no, I think they were dead the whole time. I thought they were like nun ghosts.
They even make a point about, so all of the other nuns had died up to that point, except for the one that hung herself at the beginning of the movie, because they even make a point of saying that like, Vanak or whatever the demon's name is has to possess a body. So when she threw herself off, she wasn't killing herself. She was sacrificing herself so it didn't have a body to possess.
Right.
So they made the point of like she was the last living nun when she hung herself.
But
so
obviously,
the person you're arguing with on Facebook, you can take that to them because you were right.
They're wrong. Yeah, Valak was obviously, hanging around trying to find a meal ticket out of there, I guess. So the way that the movie leaves things, Valak gets sealed back in the earth. We think the threat is over. And then we find out, oh, no, at least part of Valak somehow possessed Frenchie. And then, whatever's going on with Lorraine, Irene, whoever. I guess that's at least the only concrete connection we have.
And Frenchie gets what is it called? Possessed by a French kiss.
Yeah,
that's
really
why they
does,
named him Frenchie, right? Didn't he put his tongue down his throat to like?
It was like a
black, snake tongue.
It was a black snake because they also said that he was Valak, the something of serpents,
the defiler.
Yeah. But like snakes are his thing.
He defiled Frenchie, all right.
Oh yeah, that's true. Yep. Do we have anything else to say about the Nun, you guys?
No.
I mean, whatever mysteries we've got, whatever questions, like there will be another. I don't know if it's going to be the Nun, but like there will be another film in this franchise. Like this one doesn't show any signs of stopping anytime soon, does it?
I don't think so.
I don't know. Oh, I want to mention one more thing. The kind of the music that they had I don't know if I'd call it music or just kind of like chanting when the demon would appear. Like they had that. Oh no! I had to laugh when that was coming on. Like, oh, you're trying to scare us, but like we know what's going to happen.
I did find the idea that like at least one nun would have to be on duty at all times to pray to keep the demon away. I thought that was pretty interesting.
That was pretty compelling, and I liked the idea of that. So I like the idea of that because like the way they presented that was that happened originally so many years ago that this person, like there's been a nun or like, group of nuns taking shifts in perpetual prayer for hundreds of years to keep this thing at bay. Like that's a really compelling story. And I almost wish it's one of those things where it's like, you can't blame the movie for what it isn't. You can only grade it for what it is. But if we had seen a movie that was like maybe get rid of all these external characters and it is about the nuns, like the movie that probably happened before this movie where all of the nuns were being picked off by the nun and sort of realizing that their prayers were futile and having to deal with that, and the girl having to make the final sacrifice. Like that would have been
amazing.
That's probably a better movie than this. Let's watch that. Let's watch like the nun origins.
Let's do some nun fan fiction writing here, and we'll pitch it to James Wan.
Yeah, we can do that. I also thought the vial of Jesus's blood was like remarkably weird and convenient, and sort of just like everyone's just kind of like, okay, cool. When it's like it's a vial of within the fiction of this universe now, like Jesus Christ's blood was in this vial, and that's to me like the most like crazy revelation of this entire series so far. That's big stuff if you really think about it in the terms of like religious lore, in terms of movie lore, all these types of things. That like the actual blood of Christ is an actual physical object that's actually being wielded and actually being, and instead it's just an item that they find in the house and then they use it a couple of times, and it's like when they're just like, oh, okay, yeah, I think you should have this. Like I don't know. It felt, I don't want to say sacrilegious. That's not the word for it, but it felt like these characters who obviously should be like pretty damn impressed to have like the actual blood of Jesus, like a nun in training and a priest, are both just kind of like matter of factly okay with it. Like it was very weird to me.
Yeah. All right. Well, we're done, Nun. At least with this movie. So yeah, we didn't like it as much as maybe we would have hoped, but at least we got some good conversation out of it, guys. That's always a good thing, for sure. We're going to go ahead and switch gears and talk about another nun-related film, that, of course, being Sister Act, starring Whoopi Goldberg. We are going to spoil the... I was going to say the bejesus out of the film, but that is sacrilegious.
Spoil the hell out of it.
It's even worse because it's about a religious order. We're going to spoil the film. So if you haven't seen Sister Act yet, you know, make your choice if you want to hang around for that discussion or not. It's a 25-year-old movie, so chances are pretty good you may have seen it. But, you know, Jim never saw it until we watched it. So it, you know, it definitely is possible others are in that same boat. So if you don't want spoilers for Sister Act, now is your time to step away. Otherwise, here we go, our discussion of Sister Act. All right. So, Will, you and I are kind of around the same age. This came out in the mid-90s. I figure if you want to kick things off, obviously, you know, give us a little bit of setup about the film. But I'm curious, did you see this movie as a kid? Did it impact you at all? What do you think?
Yeah, so and just to lampshade again what you said before, I'm going to be diving straight into spoilers. It's been 25, 26 years at this point, which, by the way, that's kind of crazy to even think, like, wrap my brain around. But this
we're old, Will. We're old.
We are old. We are ancient. And I'm sure anyone that's older than us that's listening right now is like spitting on their radio or on their phone and like in disgust at us for saying that. But yeah, I mean, this is a movie that people have probably generally seen or, you know, have had the opportunity to, if not. So this is a comedy film from 1992 starring Whoopi Goldberg. She's this lounge singer who, after witnessing this this violent crime from her mob boss boyfriend, who she didn't realize was a mob boss at the time, she goes into the witness protection program, and they decide to place her in a in this church where she's going to pretend to be a nun. The church is led by Maggie Smith herself, who is always amazing. And while there, she discovers that the church has this really flailing music program, like this choir that just can't get their act together. So she finds a way to kind of become the new director and inspires this church to find a new way of connecting with God and with the community through music. It was really interesting rewatching this movie because I think that watching it when I was 10, you know, or so, you know, you get a reading of the movie, and, you know, and it's very much just like, you know, it's great to watch these people like start singing and do fun stuff. The mob stuff was always just like in the background, just sort of like MacGuffin stuff as a kid. Like, I knew there was a reason why. So rewatching it, getting ready for this, it was kind of neat just seeing like kind of Dolores's, that's Whoopi Goldberg's characters, her roots versus where she ends up. I like this movie. Like, I mean, it's hard to not like this movie. It's a very fun movie. It reminds you that Whoopi Goldberg, like, just sort of what type of comedic timing and what type of chop she has. I believe I also read somewhere that all the singing she actually did herself. Like, there were people in the cast who had like voice doubles for them, but she was not one of them. And her singing voice is good. Like, it actually carries these songs. It's fun. It's upbeat. It's you have to take a lot of the plot beats with a bit of a grain of salt because there are some conveniences in there. But this is the type of film where you can excuse that because, you know, that's the type of film this is. It's just trying to get to the fun. It's trying to get to the music. It's trying to get to kind of the hijinks, and it's trying to give you the good feels. Yeah, I really like this. I really liked just the ever upbeat Kathy Najimy in this. And I remember as a kid, the Maggie Smith character, thinking like, oh, what a stick in the mud. And now that I'm an adult, I'm kind of just like, I kept finding ways of going like, yeah, but she has a point. Like, it's so weird, like being able to like recontextualize and I don't know, relate more with kind of the fuddy-duddies the older I get. I don't know if that's just me, though. But yeah, Sister Act is so much fun, and definitely worth a rewatch to anyone who hasn't watched in a while. How do you guys feel?
It's interesting that you mentioned sort of the reappraisal of Mother Superior, because I saw Sister Act, I don't know, I think it was like 5 times in theaters when I was a kid. I loved that movie, and my grandma hadn't seen it, so we went to see it together. My mom hadn't seen it. We went to see it together. My sister then didn't see, So I saw the movie a lot as a kid, needless to say. And I really haven't seen it in probably a good, I don't know, 10 or 15 years. And so I kind of went through the same thing you did, Will, where it's like, oh, Mother Superior, you're such a bitch. Like, why do you gotta mess up everybody's mojo? These nuns are doing cool things and they're coming together and they're making great music, and all you want to do is tear the fucking house down. But now, as an adult, I'm watching this movie the other day, and I'm like, no, like, she's kind of right. Like, she's trying to protect her nuns from the bad influence of Dolores Van Cartier, right? And it totally legitimizes a lot of her actions for me. And I think it makes it all the sweeter for me that she kind of comes around at the end and leads this charge, right, to go to Reno and get Dolores back. You mentioned, Will, some of the like unbelievable things, like 25 nuns fitting in a single helicopter to fly to Reno. That doesn't work so well.
Yeah.
But what does work so well is all these nuns like running through the casinos and like, trying to protect Whoopi. And I don't know. It's very sweet. It's very saccharine. I guess, it's kind of like having diabetes. Too much sugar can be a really bad thing. But I think the mob stuff kind of tones some of that down. We kind of get frequent reminders of the danger that Dolores is in. And rewatching this movie, when she like appears on TV after they like open up to the public and do all this stuff, I was like, oh my God, someone's going to see her. Like, this is going to be bad for her and the Abbey. And I felt tension, I guess, as an adult that I didn't quite understand or feel as a kid. So kind of raised the stakes for me a little bit. But I love the music from this film. I feel like the music is like the thing that, it's the glue that binds all of this together. And I don't know, it's so good. It's so catchy. I actually went to try and buy the soundtrack on iTunes and it doesn't exist. Yeah. Well, I mean, there is a soundtrack, but it's not on iTunes. And so I did some digging to try and find it, and I can either download it from YouTube, someone who just like loaded it up, they burned it off, ripped it off a CD, or I can buy a CD from Amazon and rip it myself, which I guess is what I'm going to need to do. But what the heck? Why isn't the Sister Act soundtrack available for digital streaming and purchase? Come on, folks. Let's make that happen. Anyway, I love this movie, but I'm anxious to hear from Jim because, Jim, you didn't see this movie in the 90s when it came out. You're seeing it through the lens of 2018. You've heard Will and I kind of gush. What did you think of Sister Act?
I'm seeing it through the lens of, this movie was like 1989. What was this movie?
92.
Yeah. So, and I can put myself kind of in that, back in that time, and what movies were this. I liked this movie. I enjoyed it. It had a lot going for it. It had different layers, right? It had the layer of the plot driven stuff with Harvey Keitel as her kind of like semi asshole boyfriend who's a mob guy, and he shoots guys in the head in the casino, like right in front of her, basically. They didn't show that on screen, obviously, but it was implied, and I'm like, well, that's kind of weird for a movie that I thought was kind of a light and fluffy, feel good movie. You have some pretty heavy stuff happening here. And then you have, her, this is kind of like a fish out of water tale, right? She's being placed in this convent with all these nuns, and she's got to kind of toe the line. And she's lived you get the sense that she's lived a pretty lively, maybe even hard life, I guess, as a at least in adult life, as kind of a casino entertainer. And so she's seen a lot, and she's thrown. It's definitely a role reversal for her. And then, of course, you have kind of like her, this like where she kind of everybody kind of slowly sees the value in her as she like teaches the choir how to sing, and we get some of those cool songs both in the rehearsals and in the church. So it's got a lot going on, and I think it's definite crowd pleaser at the end of the day. That's what this movie was made for. Whoopi is great. Brad, I have a question for you though that I probably should have asked you. What originally drew you to this movie? Because I don't just see you like going, oh, Sister Act. I don't see you as a 92. God, you were like 12 or 11 or whatever. That I'm trying to figure out like what would have originally drawn you to this movie, or did some adult in your life like say, hey, this would be a good movie for Brad to see with me?
I can tell you exactly what it is. It's two things. One, my mom loved Whoopi Goldberg movies, so we used to watch like, I don't know, we put Jumpin' Jack Flash on, and several other of her comedies from like the late 80s. We just enjoyed those a lot together. And then the other thing was Whoopi Goldberg played Guinan, the bartender, on Star Trek: The Next Generation, and I fucking loved Guinan. She was such a awesome character back then for me, especially as a kid. She was so cool. She was so wise. She always wore big hats. It kind of reminded me of wearing a habit anyway, in some ways. So I think those two factors converged. And then added into that, I guess my little gay heart really liked musicals. And so watching the trailer, you got Whoopi Goldberg in a nun outfit singing with a choir of nuns. It was all magic, I guess so.
And I'd also like to add that like it's not like this was like a small movie either. Like this was the type of movie that I remember I saw theatrically and then ended up renting a bunch of times. Both me and my sister ended up enjoying it quite a bit. Because this was Whoopi Goldberg at that point in her career where she was, I mean, now we think about her more as like probably more of like kind of what she does with The View or things like that, right? But at the time, like she was definitely at a career high, like one of the more notable stand-up comedians who had ventured out into a few different film properties and television properties. This was so successful that they rushed out a sequel that was in theaters like a year later. Which
Sister Act 2.
Sister Act 2, Back in the Habit. And it was this was, I mean, I think a lot of the people in my peer group ended up seeing this movie, and I don't think it was necessarily a thing where it was like, this demographic or that demographic. I remember at that age, like it was a comedy and it was in theaters. So it's the type of thing that you kind of wanted to see and your parents were okay taking you to see.
Yeah, Brad, I'm kind of glad you mentioned Guinan, because I was going to guess like, okay, I know he was way into The Next Generation. That was it, right? Next Generation.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Mm-hmm.
And I know he loves that character. I just wonder if it was like the convergence of a couple of things where his love for Whoopi Goldberg as Guinan and his mom's love of Whoopi Goldberg like comedy movies. Of course, Whoopi Goldberg had done some serious roles too. The Color Purple was fucking amazing. And that's kind of what I like to see. I like to see like comedic actors that are known for their comedy chops go into something and kind of flip the table a little bit and do something totally different. But yeah, I'm glad you mentioned the Guinan thing, because I would have guessed that that's what it was.
This was 2 years after Ghost as well. So like,
Ghost. She was during Ghost.
Yeah. She was very on the radar.
Yeah. Yeah. That was when her star was burning bright right around that time.
Mm-hmm. Well, and it wasn't too long after another really great Whoopi Goldberg film called Fatal Beauty. Jim, I don't know if you saw that one, but she co-stars with Sam Elliott, who I know you like a lot.
Oh, I love Sam Elliott.
Yeah, and they were both incredible in that movie. It's kind of a it's more of like a drama, but I mean, there's some comedic elements involved. So maybe we should add that to our viewing list.
Definitely put that on the list. I will watch that. I mean, both of these actors in there, absolutely. But yeah, I'm glad you introduced me to this, because this is a movie when it came out back then. You know, I'm like 29. I'm an adult. I got, you know, my life is going in so many different directions. Movies wasn't nearly as big a part of my life back then. And certainly, like, I don't know, these kind of comedy movies weren't in my life as musicals. So, you know, it's not a movie that I intentionally steered away from. It just wasn't on my radar. And so I missed it. I hear about it all the time. You know, I know you've talked about it. We've talked about it on the show before. I've mentioned it in passing a couple of times. So I'm glad I saw it now. And it's funny because I just watched Harvey Keitel in a movie called Bad Lieutenant, which is from kind of, I think, maybe around the same time frame. But he plays a really dark character in that movie. And I do love Harvey Keitel, and to see him in this movie, it was kind of weird seeing him try to like still play like a dark gangster character, but with a kind of comedic like edge to him. It was pretty interesting. I do like Harvey Keitel a lot.
So, Will, I got to ask you, and Jim, I'll ask you the same question in just a second. But outside of Whoopi and outside of Mother Superior, who was your favorite of the choir nuns?
So and this is even for the second one. I believe she showed up in the second one too, although my memory is super blurry at this point. I really liked the Wendy McKenna, the Sister Mary Robert. Like, there's something about that character just being this, I don't know, like some of the same things that I think drew me towards Sister Irene and the Nun are what drew me towards the Sister Mary Robert here. Like the younger, the slightly more naive, like kind of bright-eyed, yeah. like I think when we think of nuns, we often think of like the stoic, like ruler to the knuckle rapper. And these characters are very different from that. And as a kid, especially, and granted, I didn't have like Catholic school as like a background. So as a 10-year-old, like my only exposure to like nuns was like what you saw on television. And so this character was a very, very different character from what I had traditionally seen as a nun. And it made me sort of like rethink like what it meant to be a nun.
All right. I could see that. Jim, how about you?
Oh, man, I don't know. I mean, Mary Patrick, Kathy Najimy's character was I love Kathy Najimy, but this character for me was a little bit too much, almost. A little bit too much of the gee whiz, like always looking on the bright side, kind of naive character. You know, her eyes were always like saucers in the whole, if you watch like every scene, her eyes like like saucers. It was a little too much for me. And it's weird because besides Dolores, Mother Superior, who you mentioned, Mary Robert, and that's pretty much it. Like, I see in the IMDb credits, all the rest of them are listed as choir nun. Like almost none of them seemed to get names. So that's kind of weird. But I would say if I had to pick, I would pick the same one you did, Will, which is the Mary Robert. Just kind of like that young one who could kind of, I think in a way she kind of sympathized a little bit with Dolores's character, maybe because she was like the more recent one brought in to this cloister, you know, this closed group of nuns, and maybe she felt closer to the outside where Dolores is. So I kind of like that relationship.
So for me, you guys both mentioned Sister Mary Roberts, who is my favorite. And of course, Sister Mary Patrick, I love too. I think they're a great duo. So rather than talk more about them, I want to bring up a nun who I feel like doesn't get enough attention. And that's Sister Mary Lazarus, the old tough as nails nun that was the choir director. She's so spunky. She's so charming in her like curmudgeonly way. And I really, really just liked her character a lot. And for me, I think part of it was like, this idea of unrealized potential, right? She didn't really know what she was sitting on with these nuns because apparently she choir. So when Whoopi kind of whipped them up and she saw what they could do, you know, I think she was feeling super jealous. She was getting mad. And then Whoopi's like reeling her in and almost making it like it's like her idea and like they're partners in crime trying to whip this choir into shape. And I don't know, that relationship kind of taught me a little bit about politics, I guess, like getting along with people in extreme situations. Like, I don't want to give away all my secrets, but maybe you manipulate them a little bit. But I felt like she was just such a I don't know. She was such a cool character, even though she was this curmudgeonly old, you know, bat. I don't know. There was something I found pretty charming about her. So,
oh yeah, ditto. She was very close to my pick as well. Mainly because she was a character who, more so than all of the other characters, like had a story arc, even if it was very light.
Yeah.
You know,
her and Dolores were the only ones in the movie who really had a story arc.
Yeah, because you could think like again, I love Kathy and Jimmy, but her character was kind of the same beginning to end. Even the character I liked, you know, Mary Robert, she didn't necessarily grow. I mean, I guess she did a little bit, like in that, like she was too shy to sing,
out of her shell,
wanted to sing. Yeah,
yeah.
But like Lazarus had like had just, I don't know, just more complexity and nuance with her. And granted, it was again only over a few scenes that we get to see that, but it's good. That's more than you can expect from a lot of movies, let alone like, kind of a lighthearted comedy.
Brad, you had mentioned, like, I thought you were going to go in a totally different direction when you said, I want to mention another nun that, you know, doesn't get that much credit. I thought you were going to mention Bill Nunn, who played Eddie, the cop. I saw his name and I'm like, he's going to say it's Bill Nunn. And I liked his character a lot. I thought he played a really good, like, fatherly, protective, almost fatherly and brotherly at the same time to Dolores's character. You know, I really liked his character, and it was good to see. He's in a lot of stuff. We see him pop up in a lot of movies, and I was surprised to see him here, and it was a pleasant surprise.
Guys, I just got a very unpleasant surprise.
What's that?
Uh-oh, what?
The actress who played Sister Mary Lazarus, Mary Wicks, she died less than a year after Sister Act 2 came out.
Oh, yeah. Wow.
I mean, I figured she was dead by now because that was, 25 years ago. But wow. Way to
bring it down.
Way to bring it down.
I've been
anyway,
but she left us with Sister Act and a performance that we can remember.
She did. And just like looking through her IMDb, like this is a character who was at least appeared multiple times on like the I Love Lucy show and was one of like the main neighbors on the Dennis the Menace show, like back in the day. Like it's just interesting, like going through and just going like, okay, oh wow, okay, yeah, okay. Like I don't know that I necessarily need to go do like a deep dive retrospective on her, but it is neat just seeing like her body of work.
Indeed. All right. Well, I think that wraps us up for Sister Act. Yeah. Any other thoughts? Are we good? Okay. Well, who knows, Jim, if we'll ever watch Sister Act 2. But at least you've seen the first one now. Sister Act 2 helped launch Lauryn Hill's career.
I am a completist. You know this.
I know.
So you've got me on the track. I might as well finish it off, even though I'm a little apprehensive about the drop off in quality of movie we'll get. But
I looked at the Rotten Tomatoes scores, and the gulf between the two is pretty dramatic. It's much higher than the gulf in quality that I recall as a 10-year-old. Now, I don't know if that's legit or not, but like I remember quite enjoing the second one had the Lauryn Hill character and the kid Amal, who was sort of like the Mary Robert of that movie, I guess, in some ways. And so there's I wouldn't let that 7% on Rotten Tomatoes fool you. I don't think
7.
I think that's what I saw. Yeah, it's got a 7. Now, granted, like that's only people doing retrospective. Like,
okay.
critical on that is over 29 reviews total, which means modern critics aren't going back and reviewing Sister Act.
Right.
So I'll normalize it with the Sister Act score, and
you've gotta adjust it for movie critic ego inflation.
Well, yeah, and a lot of people just will never give older movies that had a totally different sensibility because of the times. You know, they won't take that into consideration when reviewing these films. So
sample size is huge too. Like even the first one, I'm looking at the tomato score and it's 71% out of 24 reviews total. And like small indie films get way more than 24 reviews nowadays. So it's like sample size is huge here. I think you should go give it a watch. I think looking back on it now through an adult's eyes, I think it's more of the same and a little schmaltzier. So the first one's probably stronger, but there's some good things to check out in the second one.
So Brad, you've seen the both. Which should my expectations be as high as The Last Dragon or lower than The Last Dragon for Sister Act 2? In terms of cheese.
I would. Oh gosh, that's a rough one. I would say The Last Dragon has more cheese than Sister Act 2, but I would say that Sister Act 2 has better music than The Last Dragon.
I would imagine Sister Act 2 at least tries at some points to be earnest.
Yeah, it's got more like also popular around this time, plus or minus a few years, were a lot of those like kind of Dangerous Minds-ish, like we need to use the power of education to kind of reach these kids type movies. And so it plays into all of the tropes that you would expect from that, for good or for bad. So it's a little bit more, I think instead of cheesy, I'd maybe call it a little like melodramatic in places. But I also have to say, like, as Brad mentioned, like, Lauryn Hill is in this, and Lauryn Hill is so freaking good. Like, I don't necessarily remember her as her performance, but like her singing is like I fell in love with her through this and through kind of that early Fuji stuff before she went solo. Yeah.
So we've got some fun chat going on in the live chat.
I shouldn't have mentioned The Last Dragon. I think
Kelvin Cabrera is like, The Last Dragon fucking rules. And I agree. It's also funny because just moments before he pops up in the chat, I got this Snapchat, which you can't see very well, so I don't know what the point is. But Jim, it's a picture of a TV with you on it. And Kelvin's caption is Movie Bears podcast on my TV ? Exclamation point.
What?
Yeah. So Kelvin's saying in the chat, he just realized he can bring up the YouTube app on his TV. And Craig, hey Craig, good to see you too. I guess he's watching the same way. So guys, it's great to hang out with you, even though we're on your TV and not in the same room. So much love to you guys. Glad to have you with us. Also, Kelvin says he went to college with Lauryn Hill. So there's that. That's interesting.
I can't wait to find out more about her, because all I know is that she's a singer. I really have never really, maybe I've heard some of her stuff, but I've never really got into the music. So
she's one of those people who she went from being kind of the front person in a music group and being like this really compelling singer here to there's a point where you could make the argument that the Miseducation of Lauryn Hill was or is one of the most influential albums of its genre, like, period. Like, it's like that album, like, there are so many people that are producing music today that were influenced by the people that album influenced. Like, so yeah, I mean, check it out for that point alone, just sort of seeing this like kind of influential creator sort of like on the getting ready, like right before she peaks. I've heard Kelvin saying she was, not a pleasant person during that. I've heard that as well. I've heard some horror stories about her, but
don't bust my bubble. You guys are pumping me up.
That news is killing me softly.
She's the one who did that cover.
Yeah,
she did Killing Me Softly, and then she did a bunch of songs after that, but Doo-Wop was the big one.
Craig says your faces are approximate to actual size. but I won't include my second follow-up thought to that.
So. Well, we'll talk later.
All right. Well, guys, let's go ahead and move on to some plugs. We'll be very brief because the show's kind of gotten long, but just a few things, we want to put on your collective radars. The Predator film is coming out this weekend. We are excited to see that. I don't know if we'll revisit the original before we see it, Jim. But
I don't know, man, if I have the energy or time.
I know. So many movies, so little time. But we're looking forward to seeing that. And also, we're looking forward to having Magic Mike Levins on the show with us next week. It is about time for his return. And even though it won't be a movie about stripping, it'll be fun to have Magic Mike back with us. He's got his own podcast now. He's doing his own thing. It's always great when he comes by to say
Can it still be, though? Can we still make that one of our themes?
We could make it. We could do a shirtless episode with Mike again. He likes that.
Or at least a piece of it, maybe.
I mean, there are people out there who are predators when they see shirtless guys.
Oh my God. I don't even
know. See, now I'm worried about this being like To Catch a Predator style.
To Catch a Predator.
Oh boy. All right. So anyway, go check out The Predator this weekend. Come on back next week for our review with Magic Mike Levins. We'll see you then. Jim, what have you got this week?
Oh, so one quick thing. Brad had to do some work this weekend to get ready for this coming week. So I found myself with some time to kill. So I looked at our local independent movie theater, the Loft Cinema here in Tucson, to see what was playing. And there's a movie there called The Cake Maker, which I was interested in for a number of reasons. I saw the trailer, and it's a relationship movie. And also, it's an Israeli film. And I work with Israelis at work a lot. So I hear a lot. I haven't been to Israel yet, but I've heard a lot about Israel. And so I was kind of interested in this movie because it's a LGBTQ themed movie. And it's about this guy who's a pastry maker who falls in love with a traveling German businessman while he's working, while this pastry maker is working in his shop. And man, I don't know if I want to, I guess I can't give, I don't want to give too much away, but suffice it to say that it's kind of a gay romance story, but also a bit of a tragedy too. I think the acting in here is great. It's definitely a drama, kind of, you might say it's a slow movie, not a lot. It's not a plot driven movie, but it's about the way these two the cake maker in Germany and the German businessman's wife develop a relationship. I'll just say that. And it's pretty awesome. I enjoyed it. I'm also thinking about, as we get closer to seeing the new Bradley Cooper, Lady Gaga, A Star Is Born, I'm thinking of watching all three previous A Star Is Born movies. All the way back to 1937 is when the first one came out, David O. Selznick. Brad, I don't know if you're up for it, but something I'm thinking about doing before A Star. I've never seen any of the A Star Is Born movies. So
wait a second. Are they a series of movies or the remakes of the same movie?
They're all well, the original, and then they're all kind of based in remakes of the same movie, I believe. I don't know that I want to watch a series of multiple remakes of the movie before I go into A Star Is Born. I actually really like the trailer for A Star Is Born, and I kind of want to see it like pure without the baggage of the past. Okay. So as much as I love you, sweetheart, I think I may like circle back afterward. All right.
If that's
and
okay.
I will be the one who watches all of them and does that comparison, and you can be the one who goes in cold to the stuff.
Yes. Sounds good to me. I'm on board.
Okay.
All right. Excellent. Will, how about you? What have you got this week?
I love the plug for Cake Maker. Yeah, because that was I just got done with
Eglif,
which was our weekend-long film festival here in Austin, the All Genders Lifestyles and Identities Film Festival. Got to do some intros and some QAs and got to do some things kind of on that side of the stage, and also got to watch a bunch of great movies. And I mentioned that because The Cake Maker was the first movie that I screened during the screening process. So like we get this big list of films and we watch them. That was the very first one, and it was one that we all absolutely fell in love with, but we couldn't program because it opened before the festival.
Right.
And so it was just one of those ones where it was just like, that's such a shame. So the fact that not only you saw it, but it's out there and available and people are seeing it, like super excites me. So that's really cool. And I do want to do my big recommendation based off of another one of the films that we had play at the festival over the weekend. We had a lot of great ones, and feel free to IM me afterwards if you want some individual recommendations. That goes for anyone. But the opening night film was this documentary called Call Her Ganda. It's actually a film by an Austin local named PJ Raval. And it's got full distribution, and the studio is actually sort of doing like an Oscar push. It's sort of a long shot for it. But it's this documentary about, there was this Filipino transgender woman who was murdered by a U.S. soldier who was on, like, not shore leave, but like I guess they had docked there in the Philippines, and he had picked her up at a bar there, and things went sour, and he killed her. And so it followed her life, specifically through her mother, through a journalist, and through the attorney that was, that was representing the family, as they went through the case and as they went through just all of the trials there with both like what the U.S. government was doing to sort of like shirk responsibility and kind of what the Filipino government was doing just in terms of like trying to figure out like how this plays into international politics. It's a really, really, really good documentary called Call Her Ganda. It's getting a New York, LA release in the next couple of weeks, like the September 21st, September 28th. And then it's getting a national release later in the fall, like kind of like late October, November-ish. I think it's really good. And again, we need to support LGBTQ film as much as we can. Call Her Ganda. It will break your heart, but it'll also shed a huge light on a pretty important subject.
Awesome. I hope that we get some releases on these. This would be great. Did you say, Will, that it was still looking for release?
No, it's got distribution. They are doing a theatrical push for Oscar as kind of an Oscar hopeful.
Mm-hmm.
New York, if you live in the New York area, September 21st, it's in your area. Los Angeles, September 28th. October 5th, it hits San Francisco, and then it's going to go to a more national release. And that doesn't mean 4,000 screens, but it's going to be in more screens later in the fall. And those dates aren't determined, but we're talking probably like late October, November.
Cool. Very cool. What do you got,
All
Brad?
right.
Plug me.
I already did my plug.
Oh, you did yours. That's right. I'm sorry.
Yeah. Instead, I'm going to close the show because I got to go to bed in half an hour and we haven't had dinner yet. So that wraps us up for this week. Thanks for sharing your plugs, guys. For all of you who are hanging out with us in the live chat, Craig and Kelvin and Bobby, good to see you. Austin, everyone else who's here, Matt. Always a pleasure having you guys with us while we do the show. It was a little hard to keep up with everything in the chat, but really good to see you guys. For those of you who are listening on digital tape delay, we love you too. Just because you're not on the live show with us doesn't mean you don't have our adoration. Thanks for supporting the Movie Bears podcast for almost 6 years at this point. Couple months.
Wow.
We're going to hit that anniversary, which blows my mind. But we love you all, and we will see you next week for The Predator with Magic Mike Levins. Goodbye, everybody. Take care. See ya.
Goodbye.
Bye.